Hey guys, today I'm going to continue the Pathfinder 2e conversion to DC20 that I've been working on for a while. By viewer request from last night, I'm going to start with the Owl Bear. We kind of briefly looked at it last night just to see what kinds of abilities and stuff we were going to be building into this Owl Bear based on the Pathfinder 2nd edition version. Hopefully that viewer will be able to make this stream, and if not, then hopefully you can catch it later. I've already kind of done the basic setup for this creature, getting like both the stat blocks open, and I'm just going to start converting. So creature 4 is going to be a 5th level creature in DC20. For why, check out my other videos. Let's see. Now, a 5th level creature in DC20 could have a prime score of +4, and I'm usually good going one higher for DC20 than what it would be. So I would be good going to prime 5, like the highest attribute score being +5. With a strength score of +6 in Pathfinder, don't I don't think I want to go that high because of the way that prime modifier impacts everything, including attacks and saves, all sorts of things. So I'm gonna go with a 5 instead of the 6, which is still one higher than a 5th level creature should have, and I'm going to probably give it some extra hit points, because not only does it have a constitution bonus +5 that I didn't represent into its might, but also that's an extra point of strength that I did not represent in its stat block. So I'll bonus it a little bit, most likely hit points, and also I might give it a higher bonus to its might saves. But more on that when I get to the saving throw section. Agility +1. I'll just copy the dexterity over. Wisdom +3. Intelligence -4. Charisma +0. One viewer last night had a really interesting idea, which was sometimes they might take the wisdom score and just port it into charisma or intelligence, whichever made more sense. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll just take the wisdom bonus and smooth it over between intelligence and charisma. I think that's what I'm going to do here this time. So I'm looking at an intelligence of -4 and a charisma of 0, and a +3 bonus to kind of smooth in there. I don't think that the owlbear is necessarily very smart, but I could see maybe making the charisma bonus +2, so take 2 points of that wisdom bonus and move it into charisma, and then take 1 point of that wisdom bonus and move it into intelligence with a -3. And since the lowest stat that a human could typically end up with, or like a player character, is -2, the fact that the owlbear is less intelligent than a adventurer, it makes sense. So, and some people find owlbears cute and cuddly until they rip into you with their claws. So, yeah, I think +2 charisma is fine. Simon is being very adventurous at the moment. Speaking of adventurers, hopefully he doesn't knock the cable out of my monitor. Alright. MD is one of the easier ones to figure out because I usually just do the formula that exists in DC20. MD, of course, does not exist in Pathfinder, so there's no equivalent to look at. The formula being 8 plus combat mastery plus charisma plus intelligence. So the net result of charisma and intelligence is +2 -3. Ah, thank you. And you know, I'm not sure how to fix that. I need to look into that. I need to look into why that is. I'm using a soundboard, um, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what would be causing that. Uh, After the stream, I'll have to look into it later today. Okay, so um, net -1, and then it's prime or not prime. Combat mastery at level creature 5 would be +3. So the +3 and the -1 off of its charisma and intelligence is going to be a net bonus of +2. So sometimes there's a mono mic option. You know, sometimes the cats run across the soundboard, so it's possible that they stepped on something. I'm gonna have to not do it right now though because there's too many buttons and things. I don't want to take the time right now with away from the stream. But I do appreciate that the feedback and also the tips as to what to look for. Thank you. Okay, so 8 + 2 is going to be 10 for the MD, which for an animal makes a lot of sense. Let's see. So then it's physical defense. So physical defense formula for DC20 is 8 plus agility plus combat mastery plus any armor bonus. Obviously, Owlbear not wearing armor might have some natural armor. With an agility bonus +1, that's going to be a really low PD as well. So I will have to look at that and see if I want to adjust it or not. So just base, it would be 8 plus the 1 agility is 9 plus combat mastery of 3 is 12. That is a pretty low PD. So I might actually look at the AC in Pathfinder and then try to reverse engineer that and see how that might compare to DC20 rather than just using that 8 plus combat mastery plus agility. In Pathfinder, the AC is figured out by the creature's level, getting a +1 for each creature level. So it's getting 4 of the 21 from its level, plus 1 from its dexterity, so that's 5. So its base AC is 16 in Pathfinder without like the proficiency bonus of the creature level. And then of course it's training level. So right, 16 base is 10. So this is getting like +6 just from proficiency without counting its level. Um, that's a lot and way more than I could use in DC20. But I think I could probably give it like a +3 natural armor. And so I was at 8 plus combat mastery was 11 plus it's 1 for 12 from the agility. So we'll give it +3 and make it a 15 PD. I think that's fine, especially for a 5th level creature, and they're going to be facing this when they're level 4. So, the 15 PD is not going to be very hard to hit with plus. What do they have at that point? +5 to hit. That shouldn't be too bad. I may knock it down, actually. I might knock it down to 14. Let me figure out how many hit points it has. I usually try to balance the hit points with the PD. You know, if it has a higher PD, I usually like to err on the side of less hit points. And if it has a lower PD, give it a couple more hit points. Oh, okay. So the 15 sounded good. That's good. Uh, it's one of the reasons that I like doing this live is, we can kind of collaborate and, uh, see if we're all thinking on the same line or not. So hit points, I usually quarter the Pathfinder hit points. So 70. Well, 40 would be 10. Um, and then it's an additional 30, which would be 17 point with a remainder. So I round up, so that would be 18. As DC20, you round up most of the time. So 18 hit points, but then I would bonus it because of that Constitution modifier and that one strength that we didn't use. So I would give it plus 6 hit points, so 18. So plus 6 would be 24. 24 hit points, which I think feels about right for this creature. It's probably not as, I don't want to say as big of a threat as the Krasis from the Hunted, but I usually use that as a guideline to how many hit points things like stronger monsters should have, because that has 30 hit points. So 24 on this owlbear feels pretty much right. It is, like the legendary kind of threat that, or at least not legendary, but very well known, I suppose. Probably iconic. That's the word I was looking for. Iconic. But at level 4, my players who just currently actually leveled to 5, they were not consistently, but they could deal 9 damage in a hit, which is a lot for DC20. The way that I can think about it was the monk using an attack, so 1 damage, and then say it was a brutal critical, so he gets 1 for heavy, 1 for brutal, 1 for impact, that's 4, 2 for the critical, that's 6, and then if he had a power attack on that, that's 7, and then he could add. Okay, Simon is just crazy. For a key point, because he wanted to be a Way of Mercy monk, I gave him an ability to spend a key to add 1 point of umbral damage to 1 attack per turn. So that would get him to 8. And, if he had another thing giving another 1 damage. So this thing could go down in as few as 3 hits, but, it's likely going to take 4 or 5. So I think this is good at 24. Speed for Pathfinder, one of the things that I noticed is its base speed for the characters of 25 spaces is equal to DC20's 5 spaces. So I can usually just port over the speeds 1 to 1. Saves. Now, I feel like I keep repeating because I've said this in some of the other streams, but up here underneath Might, Agility, Charisma, Intelligence is where most people would suggest putting the saves. For me, this just works, and it's really, as long as I can use this sheet to run the monster, that's what's most important. Pathfinder does have 3 saves only, and every creature has some kind of bonus to those saves, even if it's just 2 plus their level. So again, I try to reverse engineer to figure out which saves I want to give mastery to. I don't feel like with an agility of 1 that agility is going to be the one to give the save to. Plus, you have that hefty constitution and strength bonus. So I think might is going to be the one to do. And in DC20, it would be the might score plus combat mastery if they have save mastery. So that would be 5 plus the combat mastery of 3 is 8. And I'm going to give it an extra bonus because of its strength that we didn't account for, one of its strengths. So I could go with 9. I think I'm going to go with 9. And this is going to be a really hard creature to get any kind of physical save to stick, because the save DC for the PCs at level 4 is only 15. So on a 6 or better, this owlbear is going to save. All right. And then, do I want to do any kind of mental boost? So this is based on its wisdom. Um, it only has a wisdom bonus of 3. So a large chunk of that plus 11 will save is coming from its proficiency. So I think I will give it. Of course, there's no will save, so I'm going to pick one of its mental stats, which will be charisma. That fluffy owl bear. And so we take its charisma bonus of 2 and then add its combat mastery, and we'll give it plus 5. Which also makes sense, because if you were attempting to intimidate this owlbear, it's going to make its saving throw with charisma. So I think an owlbear is probably a little difficult to intimidate. Immunities, resistance, weaknesses. Pathfinder uses a lot of this. Of course, owlbear being an animal does not have any of those. Pathfinder is also big on using skills. So almost anything has some skill bonuses. Another thing that I was talking about last night, in D&D, a lot of monsters don't have any skills at all unless they're uh, like very specific monsters, and then the skills don't always come into play, like say having an acrobatics bonus or an athletics bonus. But it is helpful for. Sorry, I'm going to read that comment in a section in a second. If let's say this owlbear was grappled and it needed to escape, I have actual acrobatics and athletics training that I know what to bonus it. In D&D, I would have to often on the fly think of, does this monster get some kind of bonus to its athletics or to its acrobatics if D&D didn't automatically give it. Do you have the DC20 magazine issue 5 with the creatures to compare with? I do. I do have all of the DC20 magazines. It's such a great value. Um, Big time shout out to Dungeon Coach for dropping the access to that magazine to the egg level. I have gotten so much value out of the DC20 magazine. All right, so acrobatics, I pretty much just copy over whatever the skills are from Pathfinder, and if I need to change them, like if it has thievery in Pathfinder, I'm going to change it to trickery for DC20. Or if it has deception and uh, persuasion, I'm just going to make it insight. Just combine them both. So part of the conversion is smoothing over the language. And if I do it now on the front end, it's easier when I run the monster because I don't have to do it on the fly while I'm running it, trying to figure out what skill to call for. Uh, and then I don't actually look at the bonus for Pathfinder. I just do as if it had training in that skill. And because it's a 5th level creature, it can actually have up to adept training in the skill. So I don't think its acrobatics are going to be that good. I think I'm just going to leave it at trained, which is going to be its 1 from agility plus 2 for its novice level training. Athletics, though, I think owlbear is very athletic. So it's going to get plus 5 from its might. And then I'm going to give it adept training, which is going to be plus 4. So it's going to get plus 9 to athletics, which is going to make it really good at grappling and really good at getting out of grapples, I think. And then intimidation. I iconically, I think that owlbears are very intimidating. So I'm good giving it a plus 9 there also, giving it adept training and intimidation. I could have also just made it novice and then it would have been plus 7, but I think that's fine. So I've been putting low light vision on my creatures in this conversion, although I don't really think that low light vision is so much a thing in DC20. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't feel like it falls into like most of the ancestry traits. It's either you have dark vision, which is not as easy to come by in DC20, or you just have regular vision. This imprecise scent may not really matter too much, and I'm going to make it 6 spaces. Actually, I'm going to make it 5 spaces, and the reason is that usually an ability like this that would be 30 feet in D&D is actually only 5 spaces in DC20. It seems that Dungeon Coach is working in fives on a lot of things, so that like Misty Step, for example, 5 spaces, so 25 feet instead of 30 feet, and Dark Vision, instead of working on 12 spaces or 60 feet, is 10 spaces. So probably for ease of math, talking in fives is easier. But I'm going to leave that sent in precise 5 spaces. I'm not sure if it's going to come into play, but it's more for me. The players are never going to see this. If I need more information about the monster, I have it. Obviously, an animal, no languages. XP. This is a holdover from when I was doing 5e conversions, but I just put the creature level in Pathfinder and then in parentheses the creature level for DC20, which is going to be 5. One higher. Again, you can check out yesterday's video and probably the one before that for information about why that is. An owlbear animal has no equipment. So we're on to its attacks. I'll just look at here. It has a talon attack, and it has a beak attack. The one thing that I need to figure out quick is there a difference between the two? Because I know in Dungeon Coach's stat blocks, a lot of the time he has uh, both melee attacks. If it's similar like this, like unarmed strikes where it's a talon or a beak, he'll have them in one line. And if there's no distinction between them, that's fine. But do I want a distinction? In Pathfinder, the beak is doing D12 damage versus the D10 on the talon. The talon in Pathfinder has the ability to grab, meaning if it hits with the talon attack for an extra action after it hits, it can automatically grab the target. The claw, the talon is agile, so in Pathfinder it's more accurate on the second attack, getting a -4 penalty instead of -5. That could be represented by giving the talon attack dual wield, where it can make 2 talon attacks in the same turn, or it could make a beak attack and a talon attack without incurring the multiple check penalty. I think that's probably a good enough reason to split them into 2 lines, but that's one of the things that I do have to consider when I make these conversions is, are the attacks different enough that they should have their own line? The attack bonus is going to be the same for both of them. It's going to be prime plus... Man, these cats today, I don't know what's gotten into them. Too much catness, maybe? Alright. Let's see. So, prime plus combat mastery, so that's 5 plus combat mastery of 3 is 8. And plus 8 to hit with the beak. The next question is, how much damage should it do? DC20 has low hit points and low damage. So, it's best to start with a base assumption that the damage is going to be 1. And, I'm just realizing I'm going to have to move this cat, because he is bumping the monitor and probably going to bump the camera and other things. So, just move him off of there. Okay. So, damage. Usually, start with a base of 1. Decide if it's worth going to 2. Sometimes it can be. And then it's also worth thinking, how often is this creature going to hit, and how many hit points do the players have? And at level 4, uh, I think the average is probably somewhere between 10 and 14. So we could say maybe 12 is the average. And, if you're doing 2 damage base and then, plus 1 damage by 5 that you beat their PD by, you rack up the damage pretty quick, especially if you add impact or something else to the attack. So I think I'm okay with 1. And also, the owlbear has a lot of special abilities. So the talent is piercing. I usually just use the whatever the damage type was for Pathfinder. If it was a magical type like acid, change it to corrosion. And then for the talent, I wanted to add dual wield. Just for me to know that it can make 2 attacks with the talons without incurring the multiple check penalty for the attacks. That kind of mimics, like, say, a monk or anybody else that's making 2 unarmed strikes or dual wielding with weapons. The beak is there's the thing. Do I want to add an extra point of damage to the beak because it can't dual wield? Do I want to add another trait to it? Maybe I want to add another trait to it. Maybe I do want to just keep it 1 piercing, and we'll give it impact. So that the beak has something special about it too, because otherwise, why would it ever use the beak? So, and you've got this beak clamping down. I think that beak might have impact. So. All right, and then the range. Like last night, I had also realized that the troll had reach, so we made it 2 spaces. But usually, so for me, melee is like 1 space. But I know that when I see it, that's what that is. And now I just have to figure out its special abilities and then make them work in DC20. Goodness, these cats today. All right, so we've got blood curdling screech. For some reason, and I'd mentioned this last night too, the Roll20 Pathfinder sheet is not. It's not giving me the actions for all the abilities. So I have needed to access Archives of Nethys from time to time. There is going to be an AP cost. I don't know what it is yet. I'll look at that. And paste. And then I need to read over this and see that it makes sense in what it does. But before I do that, I think I'm just going to copy all of this over, and then I can figure out how it all works. Because I need to balance these abilities and make them work within DC20. Some of them might end up being attack enhancements, and I will probably give it a grapple attack enhancement that will simulate the grab that the Talon can do for an extra action, but DC20 does it a little bit differently. Rather than it being, if it hits, it can spend an action to grab. This would just be an attack enhancement where the target of the attack makes the save against grapple, and if it fails, it's grappled. But that also, could affect the way that an ability like Gnaw works, where until I read it over, I'm not going to really know for sure. I just know that I definitely will want to try to represent these abilities if possible. And then the Screeching Advance. Sometimes I will go like 1 by 1. I really just kind of wanted to get these on here, though. And I'm not sure the AP cost for that either. For Pathfinder, it's 2. Alright, so let's look at this now. The owlbear unleashes a loud screech that terrifies its prey. Each creature in an 80-foot emanation must attempt a DC 20 will save. Regardless of the result, creatures are temporarily immune for 1 minute. Critical success, the creature is unaffected. Success, the creature is frightened 1. Failure, the creature is frightened 2. Critical failure, the creature is fleeing for 1 round and frightened 3. So these levels of success don't truly port over 1-to-1 to DC 20. So I will show you what I do for this, but I have a really good idea currently. Um, so each creature in an 80-foot emanation, I need to deal with that first. How do I want to represent the 80-foot emanation in DC 20? So normally, say like a 60-foot ability like Dark Vision 60 feet in D&D would become Dark Vision 10. So 60 feet in D&D usually becomes 10 spaces in DC 20 or 50 feet. So the ranges are a little bit shorter. However, I don't know that like 70 feet or what would 70 feet be? Is that 15? Maybe that is the answer, 15 spaces. Yeah, you know what? I think that's right. I think we make it 15 spaces. Um, 15 space. In a 15 space emanation. Again, like, there's probably a better term than emanation for DC 20. I'm not 100% what it is, like, without really digging into that. Um, but I know that it's centered on him, and 15 spaces around him is going to cause people to make a saving throw. I'm also curious. I'm going to have to look this up on Archives of Nethys. Um, oh no. Okay. Owl Bear. Um, what is the action point cost in Pathfinder for that ability? Blood Curdling Screech. It's only one action in Pathfinder. I think it is a powerful ability, but I think one action is probably fine because regardless of the result, they're temporarily immune for a minute. So it's a once per combat ability that it can use. So I think I'm good with one action point on that ability. And the DC is going to be the other thing. So the DC is going to be based on its DC 20 DC because every creature has a DC, which is really nice because you can just look at what the creature level is and you know what its DC is pretty much. The DC is 10 plus Prime plus Combat Mastery. So with a Might of 5 and Combat Mastery of 3, it has an 18 save DC. So the DC to save on this is going to be 18, which is actually pretty high. Um, but, it is a terrifying creature doing a terrifying screech. And of course, it's not going to be a will save, so it'll be a mental save. There's the possibility that it's a charisma save. It could be. But I like the way that DC 20 does physical saves and mental saves. So, giving you the option of the two. You know, from the mental end, maybe like the intelligence end, maybe you're smart enough to realize what the owlbear's doing. And from the charisma end, you're able to shrug off the effect. I really like that DC 20 usually gives you two saves, and it's not always split down the middle with physical save being best out of agility or might, and mental save being the best out of charisma or intelligence. Sometimes, like Dungeon Coach has suggested with polymorph, say the creature might be able to make a charisma save to force of will, you will not change me, but also might save to say physically, you will not change me. So I usually like to give the option of 2 saves when it makes sense. So continuing on, regardless of the result, the creature is temporarily immune for a minute. I agree with that. One other thing that I usually do is anything that I change, I highlight so that I know that I've already changed it to DC20, and it helps those things jump out for me. Temporarily immune for a minute. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get rid of critical success. And on a success, it is going to be unaffected. And then what we're going to do is change this to failure. And then we're going to make this failure each 5. Most likely. That's how this would normally be worded with an alternate extra effect on a critical failure. The other thing that I would like to do with this is just kind of space it out the way that it would be in DC20 where it's easier to read so that I can see all of these things very clearly and then bold them so that again I can see the success, the failure each 5, and the critical failure. Now I haven't actually really changed anything as far as what happens on these failures. Frightened is a very powerful condition in DC20, so I don't think that it would end up frightened right out the gate. Intimidated is a fine condition to give on a failure. So the thing is that a lot of this is for Pathfinder is based on on a success even you would be frightened 1, on a failure you would be frightened 2, and on a critical failure fleeing 1 and frightened 3. So in case you're not familiar with Pathfinder 2nd edition, Frighten gives a -1 to all of your D20 rolls for each level of Frighten that you have. So, being Frightened 2 is -2 to your rolls, and Frightened 3 -3 to your rolls. And every round at the end of your turn, it gets better. So if you're Frightened 3, it goes to Frightened 2 at the end of the next turn, and then at the end of the turn after that, Frightened 1, and so on until it's gone. Those mechanics don't necessarily work, again, in DC20. So I need to figure out what the best way to maintain the feel of this Screech and have it work in DC20. Again, I think we have a good basis with this: success, unaffected; failure, intimidated. What I could do is change that failure each 5, because there's not something that's going to happen on each 5 unless you take like a point of psychic damage or something of from being feared. But that's not what this ability does in Pathfinder, so I don't think I want to add damage to it. And each 5 is not going to actually make sense. So I think what I could do is it could be, instead of each 5, just failure either 5 or failure 10 make you rattled and then actually frightened on the critical failure. Because frightened in DC20 is that you are rattled, so you can't move closer to the source of your fear, and intimidated. You have disadvantage on all checks while your source of fear is within your vision, or as long as you're aware of the source of your fear. And then Frighten adds that you have to spend actions moving away from the source of your fear. And that's what fleeing is. So I think actually being frightened is fine here, and being frightened adds the fleeing. So I think on a critical failure, just being frightened in DC20 is the answer. Um, and then the question is, how bad do I want them to have to fail in order to end up um, with rattled? I think five. And the reason is the DC is only 18. If the DC was higher, I could see making it 10. But making a DC 13, well, yeah. Yeah, they would have to get a 13 in order to end up in this condition where they are rattled. So I think if they get 13 or less, they're rattled. They can't move closer to the source of their fear, and then actually frightened on a critical failure. So yeah, I think that's a good capture of the feel of the Pathfinder ability. Um, it all works well within, yeah. So then looking at Gnaw, let me look at the Owlbear and Pathfinder again quick. It's a one action ability. So do we want that to remain as a one action ability in DC20? Most likely. Pathfinder usually charges more actions for things than DC20 would. That's been my um, what I've observed, which is kind of crazy to think because Pathfinder has a three action economy, and DC20 is a four action economy, and DC20 taxes its players less but gives an extra action, where Pathfinder taxes you a lot, and so it's kind of interesting that dichotomy there between both systems have the action point kind of system, but one is more taxing than the other. All right, let's see what this does. Requirements: the owlbear has a creature grabbed with its talons. Effect: it attempts to disembowel the creature. Oof, with a beak strike. If the strike hits, the target must attempt a will save. Critical success unaffected. Success sickened one. Failure sickened one and slowed one as long as it remains sickened. All right. There's a lot to unpack with this ability, and again, to make it work within the DC20 system, this requirement's fine. I'll just bold it so that it stands out, and then bold effect so that that stands out. So it has a creature grabbed with its talons, which reminds me, I'm gonna add a an attack enhancement here. So attack enhancement, and then usually those are bolded and underlined in the creature stat blocks in DC20, so it makes it stand out for me. And then it's going to be grab, and it's going to cost 1 AP. And it's a physical save versus grappled. Alright, and then I just bold this so that it also stands out as the name and the action point cost. I'm going to change up the language here. So, has a creature grappled. Grabbed is the Pathfinder term for grappled. Alright, so the owlbear attempts to disembowel the creature with a beak strike. If the strike hits. So this actually is almost an attack enhancement in actuality. But I could leave it as its own ability. One action point. It's still going to... It's just, it's just not the way that abilities usually work in DC20. But I think it might be best, if I want to maintain the flavor of this ability, is to leave it as its own action rather than an attack enhancement, and it will be less confusing than making it like a special attack enhancement uh, of the beak. Although it is very strong. I mean, in Pathfinder, it would be very strong too. In that you're getting the beak and that, and this is one of those ones where I could actually balance this more by maybe making it 2 action points because it's getting the beak and it's also getting to force the saving throw, and that kind of simulates the action economy, the action tax for DC20 of making the attack and spending an extra action for the saving throw. So, you know, I just spent all this time saying how usually the action cost would be less in DC20 for some things. This is an example of where I think it might actually cost more actions in DC20 to do this thing. Also noteworthy that the owlbear has 4 action points instead of 3, so that extra action cost is not necessarily going to um, be that taxing. But it also could, for its first action, if it was already in melee with somebody, make an attack and add the grab maneuver, and if it grapples, then do this gnaw with its last 2 action points. So another thing that Pathfinder does really good, I think, is really dynamic creatures where, like, analyze creatures important, or in Pathfinder, recall knowledge, because you would know that it has this ability, and then you might not want to end your turn in melee with it, because if it has to spend an action to move up to you, it can't grapple you and do this gnaw very easily in the same turn, unless it just spends an action like on a grapple, making like the contested athletics. All right, and then I just need to unpack this saving throw. The saving throw is going to be the same as the creature's saving throw DC, which is 18. Again, not a will save. I honestly, this is going to be one of those times where I think it actually makes sense to be a might save, might or charisma save. Again, it's like your charisma, your intestinal fortitude to like not be affected by having this owlbear ripping at your guts, or a physical like hardiness of shrugging off the blow. So I really think this is a very cool moment for DC20 to shine by allowing both a physical save and a mental save for this kind of situation. And, you don't see that often. And again, I would highlight this to show that I changed that. All right, then the thing is, what happens on the different levels? The success. On a success, they're going to be unaffected. So we're not going to gate that behind a critical success. And the reason is that in Pathfinder, you get a critical success by beating the DC by 10 or more. In while the by 5 system, this is probably my number one takeaway from converting Pathfinder to DC20. While the by 5 system is way more dynamic than the 4 degrees of success in Pathfinder, because you have way more degrees of success. You have like success for meeting the DC, and then success each 5 if you want, plus a critical success, plus failure each 5, plus critical failure. That's a lot more range. However, the critical failure and critical success happens at the same rate as most games, unlike Pathfinder. So you're not going to have, it's like, 5% chance. So you're not going to have those critical successes or critical failures happen as often. And so you can't gate like being unaffected behind a critical success. In Pathfinder, you can gate those things behind a critical success and it's fine. But for DC20, you just can't do that. You can't say that you need a critical success because it's just not feasible for the system. So, one thing that you can do is set the DC higher, and then maybe like 5 higher, and you're unaffected at that point, and then make the first failure whatever would happen on a success in Pathfinder. That's one way that you can do it. That's what I did with the nightmare terrain that we converted yesterday. Is I set the DC 5 higher than it would have been. The DC ended up being 23, and on a 23 they were unaffected. On an 18 to 22, so that was failing, just failing. They had a minimal impact, and then failure each 5 from there. I think it was intimidated if they failed. So if they got an 18 to a 22, they were intimidated, and then if they failed by 5 in each 5, it was like a point of psychic damage with an additional point of psychic damage on a critical failure. So my suggestion would be if you were going to keep just the 4 degrees of success as it is and use it in DC20, you need to set the initial DC 5 higher than whatever you want it to be. Make that your critical success where they're unaffected at that. By beating what you wanted the DC to be by 5, they're unaffected. The same as getting a critical success in Pathfinder. That will give you a similar feel to the 4 degrees of success, the way that they work in Pathfinder. And then, you know, for failing, you give them the success, whatever the success would be. Because in Pathfinder, when you succeed at a check for a saving throw, you usually still incur a penalty. It could be half damage if the spell does damage. If it's fear, the fear spell, let's say, even on a success, you're still frightened 1. So you usually do take some kind of a penalty even on a success in Pathfinder. And then failure being like the full effect, that would be failure each 5. And then on a critical failure, you add, an extra penalty. So that's the best way to just 1-to-1 port it over. Start your DC 5 higher, and then failure each 5, and so on. But I'm going to run this like we did the other ability up here, where it's success, failure, failure, probably just failure 5. Honestly, I'm not going to probably do failure each 5, and then critical failure. Actually, this doesn't even have a critical failure, so it's just going to be failure and then failure 5. Yeah. Failure 5. Again, that's like getting a 13. That would be pretty bad. The failure just failing, so getting a 17 or less, and then the success actually succeeding. Unaffected, that's good. Second one doesn't exist in DC20. So the only mechanic that I know of that works with the way that Sickened works is exhaustion. Although Sickened doesn't impact your speed. So let me actually, in every stream I forget to do this, but DC20 beta, pull up the rulebook. I want to look at the conditions quick and see. I want to see what the conditions are and see if there's anything else that might work. You know, it could be bleeding. That's not. It doesn't work the same way that doesn't work the same way that the sicken does in Pathfinder. Sicken, just like frighten, makes you take a -1 penalty to all of your rolls, and also your armor class and things. And unlike frightened, it doesn't just get better. You have to spend an action to retch to try to get better. Um, this is actually a weird sicken where, like, being sickened from having your guts torn at. I don't know that retching, but probably just mechanically spending the action making a saving throw. Exhaustion doesn't really make sense. Um, so there's not really a good way to do. There's not really a good way to do sicken. So maybe on a failure, the target is exposed or impaired or I don't know. If anybody in the watching has a suggestion, I'd be open to whatever you might have as an idea. Um, being exposed because you've had your guts torn out, that could make sense. Being hindered, and maybe it's it could just be straight to impaired. Oh, and then heavily impaired. Yeah, okay, that could work. So, yeah, maybe this is impaired. So that's disadvantage on physical checks, which would include attacks, and then that relied on, like, martial attacks, and then heavily impaired also have disadvantage on physical saves, so that you can end up physically impaired by failing by 5 or more, or heavily impaired. The target is uh, heavily impaired. And then, a duration. So, in Pathfinder, you can spend an action to attempt to recover. Um, I think I have the wording wrong on repeated saves. I should look at that, but that's kind of what I would want. Would be where you would make, like, you can make a saving throw at the end of your turn to recover, and maybe that's just what I need to add in here is um, the creature can make a saving throw at the end of its turns, ending the effect on a success. And it's one where, especially if they're heavily impaired and relying on their might save, um, they'll have a difficult time making that saving throw, but they could also fall back on their charisma for their intestinal fortitude if they needed to. Um, yeah, I think that now works well within DC20. So the Screeching Advance, looking at this owlbear, the Screeching Advance is 2 action points in Pathfinder. The owlbear makes a blood-curdling screech and strides twice. All creatures within 80 feet at any point during this movement are subject to the effects of the blood-curdling screech. So it's kind of like getting 2 movements and then this once a day or once per combat ability. Um, I don't think that necessarily getting that extra getting that ability tied into here actually really makes that much of a difference. Because it's a once per combat thing anyway. I mean, it is getting two moves as well, so it can move twice uh, for two actions, and then it's also getting that one action point ability. Um, I struggle to think that if I were to give it the ability to spend one action point to move twice, like why wouldn't it do that every time? I mean, it could just be kept as it is. It can move twice. The point of it, I guess, is that it can affect creatures within, along its path as it's moving rather than just where it is at that moment. But also, a 15 space area is rather large. So I don't think it would have a problem catching the whole party with the Screech. And the room that they're fighting it in is small enough that that's not going to matter that way either. I feel like I could do better than to just copy this ability as it is. Um, but it also needs to be not so good that it does it all the time. Maybe it just makes an intimidation check, a normal intimidation check, and it moves twice. And then, if it does this twice, it could move four times for four action points, which is normal. And it would get two intimidation checks, but the second intimidation check would be at disadvantage. It would be out of action points, and it couldn't empower to remove the disadvantage. So actually, I really like that. And it separates it from this once per combat ability up here, Blood Curdling Screech. So the Owlbear moves twice. The Owlbear gains the benefit of two move actions and makes one intimidation check. Yeah, I think that's cool. Very flavorful. It could do it twice, so it could get four spaces of movement. Same as if it spent four action points. It can make the two intimidation checks as like an extra benefit, but it probably wouldn't want to do that because the second intimidation check has disadvantage, and it doesn't have the action economy to empower that intimidation check. So we got a visitor. I think I am gonna have to hop off now, but I did finish the owlbear, so that's good. And next time we will work on another monster. So until then.